Hi everyone and welcome to today's session of Fix the Basics and Stay Secure with me and Ronnie Dion. And today we're going to talk about what I just said, Fix the Basics and Stay Secure, and the main reason to that is the vulnerability log4shell, which popped up in the last, I think it was the last 2 weeks at the point of recording the session. And every organization is busy with the log4shell vulnerability, and not even the organizations, but also the Security Operations Center. And what we in this session would like to explain you, or actually what Ronnie is going to explain to you, is what we need to do to be protected a bit more against those vulnerabilities. What do we need to do to be protected in the right way and make sure that we don't detect the vulnerabilities. Of course, we do need to detect the vulnerabilities, but mainly that we have an easy way to fix it. So protect your front door is step one, and then of course detecting is step two. But protection is quite important in this case, and it feels like a lot of organizations these days do think, we will detect and then we will fix, but don't take the step to protect. Is that right, Ronnie?
Oh yeah, actually it is, Pim, and that's also one of the reason why I was bringing this subject to the table. It's the fact in the last couple of weeks, customers or organizations are quite busy to solving the vulnerability of log4shell, for example, and it's taking time, and everyone more or less I wouldn't say panic, but it's taking their efforts and time and labor from their day-to-day business, and they have to postpone other things to make sure that their business stays running and determining whether or not they're vulnerable. And that brings me to the question for myself. Why time over time I do see breaches in the news. It's hitting the headlines, and it's a kind of a repetitive motion. And breaches are on the rise. Threats are evolving, and we know it, and it will last for sure. They are permanent, and it's also. With IT, we started in a parameterized way, where we had the firewall at the parameter, and everything in your network was secure. But now, when we are adopting cloud technology, we are working hybrid. Identities are shifting to the cloud. It provides a lot of possibilities. We are more productive than ever. But for the other end, it's also requires a different way of managing your IT environment, your identities, not only on-premise, but also in the cloud. And it doesn't resonate only to your identities. It goes to your endpoints, it goes for your data, it's your network. Yep. So this should be also a different mindset. And I'm a little bit surprised that so many organizations, whether it's a small one or an enterprise organizations, impacted, and that was a little bit strange, and where it's actually the root is how you can prevent it, how you can make sure that you are in more control. And one of the things I'd like to emphasize is a thing which is actually Fix the Basics, and that's based on a report, the Microsoft Digital Defense report, which actually underlines fixing the basics.
Yeah. Can you maybe tell a little bit more about fixing those basics? What does that mean actually? Because fixing the basics sounds very generic. So what are those basics?
Yeah, that's a good one, Pim, and that's one of the things. This is a snippet from that report, and it's definitely a report I can recommend you. It's not only a bunch of paperwork. No, it's a very informative report, which gives the context. but also some pointers, some actionable pointers you can easily adopt. And this is actually a good summarization of those actions. And bringing those in practice, you're almost for 98% leveraging the protection your organization needs. And I'd like to highlight a few of those, which are in this bell curve and actually can be related to fix the basics. And one of the first things is identity. And identity comes on premise, or if you're in a startup or a modern organization in the cloud world, but becoming more and more often hybrid. And one of the important things is protecting your identity, because identity gives access to resources. And the back actors, for example, they are gaining to retrieve your credentials, for example, to do more harm, to do lateral movement and gaining more access in your organization and exfiltrate data, whether it's IP or other stuff to achieve. And just by enabling multi-factor authentication, you are reducing the surface attack from a security perspective. And it is not only limited to multi-factor authentication, for example, but also reducing legacy authentication.
Yeah.
Because legacy authentication can be also misused to gain credentials and do more harm.
Or replacing service accounts, for example, with service principals.
Exactly, and there are so many aspects from an identity perspective. Actually, encourage you to modernize your identity, make sure that your identities become synced, so you can also leverage the protection from the cloud, like password protection, other things like self-service password reset. So users are no longer depending on IT, but they're able to change their passwords themselves in case of a necessity therefore.
Yeah.
So that's one important start with fixing the basics.
Yeah, totally agree. It would be weird if I didn't agree with you on this.
Yeah, and definitely like the identity, man. You couldn't be more agree with this, and this sounds like music, I believe, for you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations still
that surprises me.
As one of their main goals, and they make exceptions. Exceptions are simply made too easy. That I think that's the message which we need to send with this recording, at least in terms of authentication.
I agree, and there are so many measurements and controls which can be applied, but please just start with the basics. And another thing is privileged identity management, and just apply the least privileged access to users, whether it's just normal accounts or more privileged account, just in time access and just enough access. It's also part of the basic hygiene when it comes to identities, and whether it's separation of duties and that you don't combine administrative accounts with a normal account, or syncing accounts which has privileged access or administrative access in your cloud resources. Those are also common practices to apply.
Yeah.
And also helps to reduce the surface attack.
Yeah, totally agree. And maybe a tip which I can give to people, because the reason what I see in most cases within organizations is, well, if a first line engineer needs to activate 10 roles in the morning, then it takes a lot of effort. Well, then explore the use of privileged access groups, where you can combine the roles on one group, and the user makes itself eligible in the group and activates his permissions, and therefore gets the 10 roles at once. It's better than providing those kinds of users with an extensive amount of permissions. Don't do that. Give them what they need for their daily job, and preferably on an individual role-based because it makes it more secure. But if that's less convenient, you can eventually decide to combine them with privileged access groups.
Yeah, definitely, and I can imagine it's if you have by default easy access to everything, that benefits from your work, but that's also benefits from bad actors to gain access and get used to it. Make sure that you have the proper implementation with privileged identity management, and you will definitely benefit from it. So yeah, great tip, Pim. And as part of all these basics, one other thing I would say is keep up to date. And it's an open door. But getting back to the introduction, you mentioned like Log4Shell. It's actually a small tool which is outdated and which contains a vulnerability. And preventing is better than gaining the harm. And make sure that not only Windows, but also all other devices cross-platform, but also applies to applications. Make sure that you update your estate frequently. And this is also mitigating the risk of software vulnerabilities. And what I mentioned, these things can be achieved by a process, but also like solutions like your management, enterprise management. But these days also Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, for example, is not only managing your endpoints from a security protective and protect, detect, and respond manner, but also with the threat and vulnerability module and the software inventory capabilities of it. It's not only protecting it, but it's also gaining insights of what applications, software, or operating systems you are using, and whether they're not up to date, or even more important, whether you are using vulnerable software, which might also be exploited in different ways. So that's another important one. And combining these with, for example, conditional access, you can make sure that a device should be compliant, and a compliant can be policy can be a custom compliance policy from Endpoint Manager, but also a compliance policy that you are using the most recent software to make sure that your users are using updated and secure software.
Yeah, totally agree. This is something organizations today don't pay enough attention to. They're busy with running the business, and then something like Log4Shell pops up, and then shit hits the fan, as we say.
Yeah.
And then magic needs to happen to fix it instantly. While in some cases, and maybe not all of them, of course, we do know, you could already have prevented that by keeping the software up to date.
That's exactly what I mean. And it starts with on your operating system, and perhaps you might be more convenient with the operating system. And when it comes to applications, you might be convenient as well. But sometimes there is no rationale to update or replace an application, because sometimes cost is involved or whatsoever. But yeah, this underlines that Log4Shell, for example, and other examples. Just make sure that you keep updating your applications and you're running the latest versions. And of course, and that's the other one, the next one, to utilize malware detection. Capabilities like Defender for Endpoint is also able to detect, for example, whether or not you're vulnerable as an organization perspective, not only on an individual, but also for your entire organization, and what actions needs to be done to make sure you stay safe, whether it's updating your vulnerable software, but that's more from a protection side. Once the it's got exploited, then you want to detect the behavior of the abnormal behavior which is already going on in your organization. So that's the next step, being able to detect that pattern. So that's why, for example, the Defender for Endpoints is an important one, not so in the protection phase, but also in the detection phase, where you can detect and stop those malicious code or exfiltrations or other things. So that's another important part of your line of defense.
Yeah, and that's mainly based on behavior, if I'm right? So if something acts like something malicious, then that's reported. That's what you just said, right?
Yeah, and that can be in different ways. That can be based on threat intelligence, where the behavior is shared, so you're able to detect it in your own organization. Or you can apply indicators of compromise, so you're able to detect it. So there are various ways to being able to detect it, and you can detect it on your endpoints and the behavior of your endpoints. But that's also one of the conclusions of this report, is providing a holistic overview. So only you're protecting your identities won't be enough. Just protecting your endpoints won't be enough. It should be an orchestrated way, and that forms the line in defense, for example, to make sure your organization stays secure. And that's what I mean with this example of a kill chain. Bad actors can target your end users by sending an email via a phishing campaign, and then it starts from the left to the right, and then it's getting into your organization. So email can be one source of harm. Your endpoints, when it's going further, is the next hop. And then it goes from your endpoints. It can be on premise, and then it's detect or going into your identity, and from then you're able to gain data or exfiltrate the data. And that's what I mean, the importance of a defense in-depth strategy, which is also aligned to a zero trust approach, to make sure that your organization is secure. We not longer work from our office. We're working from home. We're working from everywhere. We're working with corporate devices, or it can be personal devices we are using. But again, we are just using the identity. And that's what I meant with the foundation. Identity forms the foundation through all the other aspects, like application, endpoints, or your data.
Yeah. It's more so. It's Microsoft 365. It's one platform, but to be protected, you need to configure each part of it and not just silos.
Exactly.
The silos do overlap with each other. So just protecting your identity is not protecting it. It's protecting your identity, but not your devices. So you should also do your devices. You should do your applications, which you target on your devices, etc., etc. So it's one. You need to see it as a bigger picture instead of just the silos next to each other.
And that's what I mean with summarizing up. Do the basics well. Make sure that you're updating your applications, your operating systems, and get current and stay current. And with the holistic overview, you already summarized it, Pim. It starts with the foundation.
Yeah, so sorry. I didn't. I noticed the slide, and then I realized that I mentioned the point of view.
Oh, I would say it's a strength of repeating the message. So it's definitely start with the foundation, modernizing your identities. Yes, just start with multi-factor authentication. Of course, going passwordless, that's great, but sometimes can't be applied. Just to getting back to the foundations, modernize your identity, make sure your identities are synced. Make sure that your applications are connected to Azure AD, so you can leverage conditional access, for example. And another thing is not only your identity or just your endpoints or your network. Every element can be misused and can be act as an attack vector. So that's also part of the holistic view, which you should take in mind. And when it comes to people, it's about people, process, and technology. And we covered the technology mainly in this session, but also from a people perspective, make sure that your end users are tech savvy, make sure that they are trained, they are well informed, and so they are know what the possible threats and how to detect them. So that's also a part of your line of defense to make sure that your organization stays secure. And of course, the last one, and that's actually rolling up all the things we covered. The zero trust principle. It's not a switch you can switch on. It's an approach. It's a principle which you can apply within your organization to adopt. And that's in a hybrid world where we are now living. It's becoming more and more important.
Yeah, basically zero trust. At least that's my interpretation always. Zero trust means don't trust unless instead of trust unless. Because that's what mainly the difference is. In the past, it was trust unless, and right now these days we need to don't trust everything unless we allow it, we trust it.
Yeah, actually, it's verified explicitly. Use least privileged access and assume your breach. That's actually the principles of zero trust.
Yeah. Okay. I think we can wrap up. Thanks for this great session. A great summarization. I think the report URL was shown within the on the PowerPoint deck. We will put that in the description as well within the video, so that you can easily click on it. Thanks for the great session, Ronnie. And yeah.
Well, thanks. Thank you as well.
Yeah, we will talk soon.
Definitely.
New things definitely coming up. So
meanwhile, stay secure. Eh?
Of course, I will. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.